So very good to have all of you here this morning. Visitors, thank you for joining us. We're just glad you're here. For those of you who attend here regularly, it's really good to see you here as well. And we need to keep praying. Joanne just reminded me as I'm sitting here this morning, she just said, say something about Mass. Okay. You know what? All of us know what happened this week in our state. So, man, if you're at risk and you feel you need to, please do. Please do. And for the rest of us, I don't know what to say about us. We're probably hopeless anyhow, so let's, I don't know. Tricky times, though, for churches. Man, I had a couple of friends. I won't ramble on because I want to get to our talking. But I had a couple of friends stop in that I hadn't seen for quite a few years. The house on Friday night? Friday night. And they were talking about, so one of them comes from Virginia and the other one's from Canyon City. And anyhow, and just talking with them, they just talked about some of the struggle their churches are having trying to figure this thing out. So we're not the only ones that are trying to figure it out. And let's just keep praying for those who have not come back because they just feel at risk. And for those of us who are here, that God really meets us because, man, we do need him right now. Wow. And the church needs him. We're continuing in our series on in Matthew. I'm going to try to do one of those, like take a lot of verses, but I'm only going to read a couple of them. I'm going to give you just some principles because if chapters 5 through 7 in Matthew are called the Sermon on the Mount, chapter 10 should be called Sermon on Mission. He's really teaching them this is what mission looks like in the church community. First of all, to that group of people in the context of that small group of people. But I want to just pull out some ideas. How does this play out in the larger scheme 2,000 years later in our lives? So we're going to call this Sermon on Mission. I'm going to read just, so the first section is covering verses 5 through 15. I'm only going to read 3 of those verses. I encourage you this week to go back and read this text and just start to say, God, would you open my heart to receive what this really means? But I'm going to read the first 3 verses here, and then we'll get started. Jesus sent out the 12 apostles with these instructions. Now remember, and before I read this, I want to remind you where we were last week. He's sending a group of guys out on a mission trip. And generally when we go on a mission trip, this is not what we hear. Like, this is what we're told to do. So think about how this must have sounded to the guys that were hearing this. Don't go to the Gentiles or to the Samaritans, but only to the people of Israel, God's lost sheep. Now, here's what he tells them to do. Here's why this fascinates me so much. You're going on a mission trip. Here's what I want you to do. Go and announce to them that the kingdom of heaven is near. And here's what you're supposed to do. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cure those with leprosy, and cast out demons. I said last week, whatever happened to putting a new roof on the parsonage or something? I mean, think about this. Give as freely as you have received. Father, in the few moments we have this morning, God, we desperately want to hear from you. So even as I speak, would you give me words? We don't want to just receive information. We want to receive revelation of how we live this out well in our lives. In this culture, in this time, in the chaos that we're trying to work our ways through, trying to live well, trying to represent you well, in that chaos, would you help us to live this out well? So Holy Spirit, minister to our hearts. In Jesus' name, amen. So last week, just to get us all on the same page, last week we talked about mission essentials, and it started in chapter 9, and there's just 4 of them. I'm going to go through them real quickly, just set us all up. Jesus, when he begins this idea of mission, because in chapters 8 and 9, he's done a lot of miracles, and they're watching him, and they're looking at him and kind of taking in, this is Jesus. This is the guy we're following. And then when he gets to chapter 10, he's like, okay, now it's your turn. Remember who these guys are. These guys haven't been trained in seminary or anything like that. These are just ordinary guys. I mean, they're fishermen, they're tax collectors, they're zealots. They're just. It just feels like this group of guys. It's like, what? It's our turn. It's our turn at the plate now. But he sets up the essentials of missions by saying this. First of all, as we talked about last week, first of all, we have to have the heart of Jesus. It says when he looked at the crowd, something happened inside of him. He just didn't look at him as a bunch of people that had no purpose and no meaning in their life. He looked at him and he starts to see beyond all the facade, beyond the tattoos, beyond the facial hair, beyond the clothes that they were wearing, beyond everything he sees down inside of him. He says, man, this group of people need hope. They need me. And so he has this ability to see. And I said, the thing that we must have when we go on mission, wherever your mission is, if it's in Westcliffe, it's in Custer County, and you're in a crowd, because he places every single one of us in a crowd intentionally to engage that crowd. But to do that well, we must begin by seeing what's really going on inside of people. We can't just look at the surface and say, well, whatever, it looks like that guy's doing all right. How do we know? Because we have this ability to see deeper when Jesus sends us on mission. So you have that idea. The second thing is then you pray that God would send somebody into the mission field. And then the third one is he's going to gift you. He's going to give you a gift to accomplish his mission. It says he gave them something. And the third thing he sent them out the fourth thing he sent them out as a team. Don't ever try to do mission alone. Because if you're doing mission alone, that mission by definition is a very small mission. It's only teams that accomplish a lot. By definition, you can only do so much, but if you team up with something, it expands your possibility of doing much more. So that was kind of the essentials. Now we're getting into 3 ideas with mission, and he's beginning to teach this. Now, let me just say, I'm going to just pick out a few ideas, because part of this is specifically for them. It doesn't apply to us. He's talking to them. This is the mission you're going on. But I want to pick out, even from that, some ideas that we can apply to our hearts, and we can apply to our situation. So the first one is, he says, I'm going to just call it mission travel. And he begins by saying, I'm sending you. So when we go out on mission, don't go unless you have this clear sense that God is sending you on a mission. You're a sent one. And he's authorized you to go. And so that's the first thing. But then he says this, verse 7, and for those of you who have been here through this series, have you noticed this reoccurring theme? It just keeps coming up. It says, go and announce to them what? How often have we heard that one? Kingdom of heaven is near. Now, let me back up to chapter 3 I think it was chapter 3, chapter 4, when we started to engage this idea. Jesus begins to go around telling the good news of the kingdom, and he gave John is sent to say the kingdom of heaven is near. Jesus shows up and he starts preaching, and what he's preaching, part of his message, kingdom of heaven is near. And we looked at that. That could mean chronologically near. It means like you've been waiting for a long time for the kingdom, and now it's finally here. It's near. What's near, though? Is that 40 years from now? Because they had been waiting 400 years for this kingdom to show up. So does he mean, when he says near, does he mean chronologically near, or does he mean geographically near? If you chase that word down, he means geographically near. He's saying it's all around you. Why that's important? It's possible to live in context of the kingdom and not even recognize it. It's near. It's in your vehicle. It's at your job site. It's in your kitchen. It's everywhere you are. Do you recognize it? Now, I want to just do this, and I want to do this quickly, and I want to try to not complicate this, but so that we kind of pick up, because it's going to help us understand the next two ideas in this sermon on mission that Jesus says. When you're born into this world, you're born with ways of processing reality in this world. We call them the five senses. So, Grant, barring there's some physical handicap, every child comes into the world, every person comes into the world with these five senses. And as they develop, they have the ability, those senses have a way of picking up reality around them and helping them process the world they're in. So they start to see things. Right? At first they don't see much. And then they start to see. And then they start to hear. And then they can taste. And then they touch. And they have all these ways of processing the physical world. All right, now here's what I want you to know about your life. When you're born into the kingdom of Jesus Christ, He gives you senses to pick up the reality of that kingdom. Amen. And you begin to see differently. You're not only seeing on one level. Here's the problem we have as human beings. I see on one level what's going on around me. So that feels more real than this other kingdom thing, right? All right, so let's just chase that a little bit. So when you're born again, you're born into a kingdom. The only way you can understand the reality of that kingdom is God gives you senses, 5 spiritual senses, to take in the reality of that kingdom so that you know what's going on when you're caught in this one. You see what's going on? This one reflects this one. So you begin to see what's happening in the spiritual kingdom. You can hear. What does the psalmist say? Oh, taste that the Lord is good. Why does he use that word? Because when you taste something, you're taking it inside of you. You're not just seeing it happen to someone else. You're not just hearing that it happened in some other part of the world. You're tasting and you realize, God's good to me. As you grow and develop in the spiritual kingdom, what you have is the ability, even as a child takes in the reality of the kingdom on growing dimensions, you must, in your spiritual senses, develop them so that you take in the reality of the other kingdom on growing measure, in a growing measure, in growing ways. So let me talk about this week. So Friday, I think it was Friday, we get this mandate. Was that Friday? We get this mandate that we need to wear masks. So, can I talk about myself? Because I don't know how you guys process things like it. Here, let me talk. So I'll just talk about myself. So in my physical world, my physical senses took in this information. I heard the information. What do you think it did to my physical being? Does anybody want to guess? Do you guys actually know me? To understand my response, you'd have to meet my dad. When they say, you're a chip off the old block, I am starting to fear for my kids and my wife and all of you because I know my dad. Please don't be offended at this, but I want to say it so that you get it. You know what happened inside of me? I just didn't say no. I said, hell no. You know what I didn't do at that moment? I didn't step out of this kingdom that got me all riled up and say, I wonder what the reality is in this kingdom at this moment. See how we can, see, here's what happens. Here's what happens, and here's what we need to know as we go on mission. We're going to look around, and we're going to see things, and our physical senses are going to take in information, and we got to be careful, because it feels like that information is actually the final information. And if you take in that information, it feels like our country's just falling all to pieces really quickly, right? But what if I stepped into this other dimension and said, I want to hear from you about what's going on. I want to see from you what's going on. I want to taste from you what is happening in my world at this time. I want to know what's happening here so that I can put this in perspective. Doesn't change this. Was that confusing? Do you follow that? Spiritual senses, physical senses? Because what can happen to me very quickly, I can get so caught up in this part of it, the physical side of it, I forget that he's still in control. I forget that he's outmaneuvering Satan on every one of these things. I forget that. And because I get so caught up in the reality here, because this reality feels so much more real than that one. Because I can't see it most of the time. There's times I don't feel it, and there's times I go through periods of time where I don't feel it. So when he sends them out, he tells them, you tell people this. When they look at their world was dominated by Romans. They despised the Romans. Their world had poverty and slavery and all that in. And those people, as they took in that information through their 5 physical senses and they processed that information, that felt like the only reality that was out there. And he says, I want you to go out and I want you to tell them there's another reality that's much more powerful and real than even the physical thing that you think you see. You go tell them the kingdom's right in your midst. What a message. Don't you love that? We get to do that. And as you go, you're going to run into desperate people. And when you run into desperate people, when you run into the despised, the diseased, when you run into the dying, when you run into the dirty, the lepers, when you run into the despised, you tell them about the kingdom. You tell them about what's really real. You tell them the truth, and you touch them with that. And that's the mission he sends them on. What a mission. What a mission. Now, let me just, part of it, here's when I say part of it, let me just chase this down so you understand what I said. That part of it doesn't apply. He said, by the way, when you go, don't pack any extra clothes. If any of you have gone on a mission trip and only wore, that was what you jumped on the plane with, that was all you had? See, some of it's specific for them. Why would he say that, though? He said, by the way, don't take any money. Well, that sounds like a great idea. Let's go on a mission trip. No money. Don't take an extra set of clothes. Don't worry about where you're going to stay. You know what I think he's telling them? When I send you out on a mission, you need to trust me. I'm going to get stuff arranged for you that will blow your mind. Trust me. The other part of it that is really cool about this, and I'll go to the second one, beyond mission travel. We want to look at the next part of this talk. One of the keys in mission and doing mission well is that last sentence there. Give as freely as you have received. I think one of the things that sometimes hinders my particular mission is I forget how much I've received. You know why I forget it? It's not that I don't have a lot. Drive over to my house and look at my garage right now. If you doubt that I have a lot of stuff, talk to Sean about my garage. It's disturbing. Why don't I give more freely on mission? Because even though God has blessed me in enormous ways, what I start to do is look at the other guy. You know what he has? He's a little more than I do. Like, I got an old four-wheeler. He's got one of those cool, what are those things called? I was up Hermit the other day, or the other weekend, twice. In the last month, I've been up Hermit, up that rough trail that goes through the top, and I see these really cool things. And I'm sitting on this You know what I started to do? Forget how much I have. It's like, I need one of those. Actually, I need two. Because I don't want to ride with Joanne. She drives too slow. Stop for a minute and process how much grace he's poured into your life. You get to go tell other people about that. Wow. Mission travel. I just want to say this about mission travel before I go to the next one. Remember who he's sending them to. He said, did you catch that right at first? He said, he's going to change the mission at the end of this book. I just want to highlight that. This is a mission specifically for this point of time. And I think it's specifically for this point of time because they're not ready to go to the Gentiles. They didn't even like the Gentiles. If you don't like the people you're sent to, you better wait till you begin to care about them before you show up. They were so focused on their own people. He said, you know what? Why don't you start right at home? I think that is a great place to start doing mission. Here's what I want you to think about. Before we think about going to another country or going to another place in our country or whatever, who's the neighbor that really needs you right now? Who's that co-worker, that person you work with? Who's that construction worker for those of us in construction that on the surface, again, if you look below the surface, on the surface it seems like he's doing fine, but maybe they need you to touch. Who's the person? He's going to send you, first of all, before he sends you out, he's going to send you around, right where you are. He's going to send you at home to your people because you know them. Here's why I don't even like that. I think it's a lot more interesting to go to, well, maybe not this case so much, but a little over a year ago, we got to go to Bangladesh. You could do mission and then disappear. They don't know anything about you again. You know why it's hard to do mission here? They get to see you screw up. They get to watch your life. It's a lot easier. And he said, no. I don't want you with the Samaritans. You start right in your own place. Start right here and start doing mission. Let's go to the next one. So we move from mission travel to Jesus is going to teach about mission trouble. And here's what he says about the trouble you're going to face. Look, I am sending you out as sheep among wolves. If I'm correct, isn't it true that this fall we get to vote on the wolves thing in our state? One of my kids will get wound tight in kind of fascinating ways about the idea of wolves in Colorado. He's painting a picture about the trouble you're going to be in if you actually go on mission. You could be in. You will be in at some point. And he gives you a word picture. You're going out on mission is like sending a sheep out into a pack of wolves. So be as shrewd as snakes and harmless as doves. Let's catch the next two verses, and I want to give you some ideas from them. But be aware. Here's what's going to happen to you. He's telling this group of guys before he sends them out, I want you to notice how he doesn't sugarcoat anything, or he doesn't send them out where they'd say, well, you didn't tell me that was going to be like that. I signed up for something else. He said, here's how this works out. You will be handed over to the courts and will be flogged with whips in synagogues. You will stand trial before governors and kings because you did something wrong? Because you picked the wrong mission effort? No, because you're my follower. But this will be your opportunity to tell the rulers and unbelievers about me. Now let's chase this for just a minute, and then we'll go to the last one. Here's what's interesting. If you back up and look what he told them on mission travel, he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to be a person who goes out and gives a message of hope. I want you to remind people that there's a reality that is much bigger and much actually more real than the one that they're seeing with their physical senses. It's a reality of God's presence around them. It's a reality of his kingdom in their world, in their lives, all around them at every moment. And I want you to do good to the hurting people. Why would anybody oppose that? Doesn't that really seem odd that he follows that idea with this one? I want you to go care for people. By the way, you're going to be beaten because of it. Why would anybody oppose somebody doing good? Here's the reality. We have two kingdoms at war. The one kingdom is all about stealing, killing, and destroying. The other kingdom is a kingdom, as Paul will argue in the book of Romans, it's the kingdom of love, it's a kingdom of peace, it's a kingdom of joy, it's a kingdom of redemption, it's a kingdom of right living, it's a kingdom of justice, it's a kingdom of hope. And when you go out on mission to represent Jesus, and you're doing the work of Jesus, healing, caring, touching, proclaiming good news, being a hope giver, guess what you run up against? A kingdom that says, we're here to steal, kill, and destroy. Now I want you to think about America for a minute. Do I need to really go here with you? I don't, do I? You can look at any action and then put anything that is done in our kingdom and put it up against those two ideas of kingdoms, and it'll tell you where it's motivated from. So take abortion. Is abortion about life and hope and a future and peace? Or is it about stealing, killing, and destroying? Here's why you're going to get in trouble if you represent Jesus in your world. It's not because they particularly hate you, but they passionately hate the kingdom you represent. Because if your agenda is steal, kill, and destroy, and you have people who are out doing other things than that, bringing hope, bringing peace, bringing life, you're going to become a target. And he says, watch out. Now, I want you to notice where the resistance comes from. You're going to have to read the rest of this text. This mentions a couple places. It's going to go on down. The resistance gets really, really intense. It gets so intense that it's almost stunning. He said, first of all, you're going to have civil resistance. The governments are going to go after you. There's going to be times and places where the government will be after you. You're going to have religious resistance. There will be times when people who call themselves Christians or followers of Jesus or whatever it is, religious people will target on you because you don't fit into their definition of. But he goes on and he says, by the way, it's just possible you'll have family resistance. I tell you this story, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because this is a hard thing to think about. It really is. If in some way the first text means that we become available, mission travel means there needs to be, the key idea is we need to be available. This one needs to be, it really speaks to, we need to be bold and courageous. I tell you a story that comes out of a Muslim country. a 12-year-old girl who was raised in a Muslim home, came in contact with a family that was Christian, and from that, she became a follower of Jesus at 12 years old, and as a symbol of her new life, she asked the family if she could have a white dress. It was a period of time as her father found out about this. I'm going to make this story short. There's a lot of details in it, but her father and her siblings took her out on the street and beat her to death for being a follower of Jesus. The Christian family came and they buried her in her white dress. One thing I do know about America, as difficult as it is to figure out some of the stuff that's going on, I tell you this. If we keep representing Jesus well, some of us are going to get in some big, big trouble. And Jesus says, you better know that's coming. You go on mission travel, you're going to meet mission trouble. And it's going to be at places you never, ever thought you'd see it. It could be as close as the people in your own family. I know people in this country who are not physically in harm, but I know people who have followed Jesus well, who in their own family, they're marginalized and mocked. Here's what he says about this mission travel, or the mission trouble part. Let me just read some of the words. If you read this text, so the text actually is the bigger text from verses 16 through 25. I only read part of it. If you read the entire text, it says, here's some of what you're going to face. Well, first of all, it says, you're defenseless without me as your shepherd, because remember what he said about that. I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. The word picture he's setting up is you don't even have a chance unless you have me. They got that word picture real quick. They really got it. He said you're going to be beaten. You're going to be hated. You're going to be marginalized. You're going to be mocked. You're going to be lied about. He didn't say it might happen. He said it's going to happen. Now, the beating part and some of that, we in America have not. That's not been part of our journey. I tell you what, I know plenty of people in this country who've chosen to follow Jesus well, who in their family circles are laughed at and scorned and marginalized. We in America need to really think about this issue. Let me wrap up this point by saying this. Jesus says, in those moments when you're experiencing trouble, here's two opportunities you have. You have an opportunity to witness to people that you never would have otherwise. Did you see that? The other thing is you have an opportunity to let the Holy Spirit speak through you in ways that you would never imagine, because he said, don't try to get ready for that speech. Don't try to get prepared. Let me speak through you. Amen. And I'll speak the reality of the kingdom through you in ways. I'll come from this reality, and I'll speak into your world, and I'll speak through your physical senses in ways that you never expected. Two enormous opportunities in trouble. Let's go to the last one. So you have mission travel, mission trouble. Now you have mission trust. That covers the rest of the chapter. But here's what I want you to look at. But don't be afraid of those who threaten you. Sean, is there another slide? Verse 28. Don't be afraid of who? Those who want to kill your body. And he comes back in verse 31 and says, by the way, in case you missed it, don't be afraid. whenever Jesus in his teaching says something that many times, that quickly, it gives you a key what the normal response to the trouble is going to be. Because when I take trouble through my physical senses, there's part of me says, I don't know, I made a wrong turn, but I need to get out of this, whatever this is that's going on. Because the first thing that happens is fear. But when I tap into the reality of the other world, I can live in trouble and above fear, without fear at the same time, in danger, in trouble, without fear. Isn't that a really, really neat promise? So I want you to, let me just summarize this one by saying this. Here's why you don't need to. Here's what he calls you to. When I say the mission it's mission trust, what mission trouble causes us to do, or kind of pushes us to do, is say, who am I really trusting in this moment? So there's this push toward, do you really trust me? And he gives us some reasons to trust because of the value he places on you. He goes through this text, and again, we didn't read the whole thing, but he's going to go through this text and say, why are you afraid? If I take care of sparrows, you think I'm going to forget about you? Do you really believe that if when you get in these troubles, and maybe the troubles are much bigger, maybe you're feeling rejection from family, maybe you're feeling in trouble with the law or with religious people, whatever it is, he said, you don't think if the kingdom of heaven is near, you don't think I'm there in that moment? Man, I've been in trouble sometimes, and I wasn't sure he was anywhere around. Have you felt that way? The value he places on you. The affirmation you will receive from him. He says, if you stand up for me, I'm going to tell my Father about you. The life he's giving you. You choose his life, he says, I'm going to give you life. And then the last one is just this, the reward. He ends up this text, the reward he gives you. You might want to just jot those down if you care to read this text and kind of see how that plays out. I think it's that point in our lives when we really have a way of, when we've developed our spiritual senses to the point where we really understand the reality of who we are in him, that makes the trouble we're in this world look vastly different. So here's the boldness, here's the courage, here's the do not be afraid part. He says, don't be afraid to speak for me. He said, there's stuff going to be revealed. I'm going to whisper it into your ear. You get on the rooftop and start to shout it. Oh, that'll get you in trouble. Don't be afraid. Have the boldness to identify with me. In many ways, either small or large, we all face the temptation at times to just kind of duck and kind of slide under cover about who we are as followers of Jesus, right? In that moment, when it feels like we're in a crowd where it isn't cool, where it's not okay, where we might be looked at as like, you're a Christian. You believe this stuff? In that moment, stand for me, identify with me. And then he asks us to radically follow him, have the boldness to radically follow him. He said, if you don't love me more than the people around you, the circumstances, the applause of men and all of that, if you don't love me more than that, you're not worthy of me. So it's this call to radically follow him. And then the last one is have the courage to passionately work for him. And he ends up the chapter by saying this. Even if you just do something as small as give a cold cup of water to a thirsty people, I see and I'm going to reward you. even if that's all you do, I still take notice, and I will give you a reward. So let me just wrap up this talk with just reminding us. Mission travel. I promise you, he's going to send every follower of Jesus out on mission. He always does. He doesn't waste your gifting. He doesn't waste your talent. He's developing you. He's getting you ready for mission travel. Mission trouble. Are you tapped into his reality and his kingdom where when trouble comes, you don't cave to fear and become a coward? You boldly stand for him. Amen. And mission trust. You trust him when it seems like it wasn't even a good idea. You still know that this was the right person to follow. This is the only way to go. So, as that comes up and finishes this out, I think it's probably good for all of us to just take a moment and say, this past week, what was the reality that was really predominant in my life? The reality of this world? Or could I kind of sense him leading and guiding and being in my heart? Because I have my spiritual senses developed to where even though it feels like this world is starting to fall apart, I know that his kingdom is here. And his kingdom is advancing. And his kingdom is, I'm part of that kingdom. And I can trust that kingdom. And I can trust all who he is. And if you want to pray about it, the prayer team's going to be up here. If you want to talk to someone about it, talk to someone up here. But when he sends you out on mission travel, you will face mission trouble. And all that is to teach you to mission trust. And I just challenge you with that.